You're listening to another episode of the Vincast. As Australia's #1 wine podcast, which is completely free of charge, I rely on the support of my listeners. Now, you can support me by getting in touch on social media, or more importantly, by leaving a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes, as Max Loves Wine did. Thanks very much, Max, for your recent review. Much appreciated. But you can also support the guests on the show, because they're the real reason that the Vincast is so great. You can do so by getting in touch with them on social media and just showing your appreciation for their time and their story. But even better, you can go to their websites and buy some of their products. You know, if they're a winemaker, or, you know, if they sell something, buy some of their product. Why not, you know, subscribe to the publication that a wine writer might write for? You know, there's lots of different ways. But if you share the love with the guests, then that makes them really glad that they came onto the show. So thanks very much, guys, as always, for listening. Thanks to all the guests for their time, and I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. On episode 98 of the Vincast, I chat with Sharon Flynn, who makes amazing fermented food and beverage products in her business, the Fermentary. Hello there, Vincasters. Welcome back to another episode of the Vincast. My name is James Guestbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and it has been a little while since I've had a new episode. My apologies for the hiatus. It's been a bit busy of late, and unfortunately has been a little bit harder to actually nail down a guest. People have pretty tight schedules, so particularly if they're coming into Melbourne for trade or some sort of wine event, they don't always have a lot of time to sit down for the podcast. But you can actually help out encouraging people to make some time to be on the show. Jump onto social media. Make sure you're using at the Vincast on Twitter, or at Intrepid Wino on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and actually get in touch with people that you'd like to hear on the show and let them know. Tell them that they should get in touch with me to be on the show, because I'd love to hear their stories. There's no limit to how many people I could have on the show, but it's all a question of making the time to be available to talk to me. But thank you guys, of course, for your support. There's no way I would be approaching episode 100 if I didn't have such fantastic listeners who to give me such feedback, and thank you so much for your generosity. On this week's episode, again, I have not a particularly beverage or wine-focused person. In fact, Sharon Flynn is a fermenter of food and beverages that aren't necessarily, there is some alcohol, I guess, but Sharon is behind the Fermentary, which makes beautiful food products out of Melbourne, Victoria, now Dalesford, I guess. And she joined me on the show this week to talk about her background and how amazing naturally fermented and pickled foods can be. So I hope you enjoy our chat. Please stick around to the end so you can find out how to learn more about the Fermentary. But until then, I'll see you on the other side. Sharon, thank you so much for making some time, and you're actually my first guest for a little while. I had a bit of a break, a hiatus, but thank you for coming to be on the Vincast.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Now, if people have actually read the description about Sharon, you'd probably be aware that Sharon's actually not in the alcohol business, but in a way she is, because she's in the fermenting business. So I thought it would be fascinating to chat with her about things that are fermented that aren't necessarily
alcoholic beverages as we normally talk about on the podcast.
Right.
Low
alcohol. there's alcohol.
Very low, yes,
yeah.
but not in the context of wine or spirits or beer or something like that. So I typically ask my guests if they can remember when it was that they had an experience with wine that made them think about it in a different way. But I guess in your case, I'd be more interested in asking you what was the incident or the experience in your life that got you interested in food in a different way, particularly as it led towards that kind of interest in fermenting.
Definitely, I remember it pretty clearly. It was when I started making bread in Seattle. We're living in Seattle, and we're involved with a really great CSA. Do you know what that is? A community supported agriculture.
Oh, cool.
It's really fantastic. It's getting bigger in Australia, but you'd pay, say, $800 a year
so
ahead.
Like community garden type stuff?
No, someone's a privately owned farm
that
you can go to and check out, and you pay them $800 in January. That was in the winter.
Yeah.
And they would promise you a certain amount of vegetables throughout the year. And
would you be expected to actually go out and work it?
No, never.
Oh,
no.
okay.
So there were certain, I paid the full amount, so I didn't have to do any work. But if you couldn't afford that, you could promise a certain amount of hours in return and get a lower price.
Okay.
But we would go on every Tuesday and pick up a box. And none of it would be packed. There'd be a list and say, if you have paid for a family of 4, you get to choose 2 broccoli heads, bag of potatoes, and you'd go and grab it all. That's sort of an honesty thing. And then if you had the time, you're welcome to go out into the farm and pick a certain weight of raspberries or a bunch of flowers every time, a dozen eggs, if that was in your thing. So you'd go and do it all yourself in that way, but it was quite easy. It was ready to grab.
Right, okay.
Anyway, I was involved with them, and it was beautiful, and they would have excesses of things every year. Like sort of at the beginning in spring, you'd be like, oh, this isn't really worth the money, because it's meager. And then by the end of the summer, you're getting so much stuff you don't know what to do with it. So they would have these collective things where you'd go and do pickling. And at the time, I didn't think about the difference between fermenting and pickling.
Do you mean like workshop type stuff?
I would say more of a hands-on gathering. What would that?
Yeah,
where you just bring 3 jars. We're going to, cut up cabbage and make sauerkraut.
Okay, but do you learn how to do it at the same time?
Yeah, you're doing it. Yeah. But it's not a lesson. It's not like it's more it's more to get it done. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a really cool time, and maybe it connected me to food in a way, but I also was making bread, and I had that feeling. I was quite proud that I was making bread because we were in a gated community and the bread was shit, And then I kind of thought, how do you actually make, where does the yeast come from? I was a bit unsatisfied putting the powdered yeast in. So then I read in this book that I had said you can buy the moist yeast from a bakery direct. And I thought, that's really cool. Here I am going to the baker, buying their yeast. And then I was like, where did they get it? And what is yeast? How do you even get yeast, And I ordered Sandor Katz's book, Wild Fermentation. It was a magazine back then. It was like a
periodical.
zine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was coming to the local university to do it at a market. And I had read that he was coming, so I bought his book. And so this is years ago. And that had a thing on sourdough.
Right.
So that was because I'd been going through that process, like how do you even get yeast? How do they farm yeast? How do they catch it? And where we lived in Seattle, that's where Starbucks is based.
Yeah, down on Pike
in our
Market.
street.
Yeah, I went there.
Oh, okay.
It's the original one's the only one with a logo where the mermaid's breasts are exposed. I think
showing. Yeah.
Yeah. Every other one, the corporate one it's just from her
head.
neck up.
Yeah. That's funny that you know that.
No, I can't remember where I'd learnt that, but I'd heard it beforehand, and so when I was staying in Seattle, I went there and went, oh, it's true.
That's it. Yeah. Well, because it was based there, and so is Costco and Amazon. I think a lot of big companies seem to be there.
Microsoft, I think.
Yeah, Microsoft. So there are a lot of in our street. Everyone worked for one of those.
Sure.
But there were people who worked for Starbucks as their food technologists, and they'd spend months designing like the lemon bread loaf or whatever. And I was like, how do you get yeast?
Did you ever meet who designed the pumpkin spice latte? Because those things are diabolical.
You love them?
No.
Oh, good. I was like, oh, I'm surprised.
God. The vanilla latte is one thing, but pumpkin spice latte.
People love that. They love it.
I can't imagine what it does to your insides.
I know. Mm.
the green. What about the green tea matcha frap?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Around St. Patrick's Day.
It was a lot of food technologists talk and stuff like that. They told me about how yeast is made into powder, and I was really unsatisfied. And then I got Sandor Katz's book, and it was all about catching it from the air or from within the flour.
Okay.
And when I did that at home, that was just, for me, it was like life-changing spiritual thing.
So did it talk about, the kind of environment you need or that is better suited for cultivating, a wild yeast strain?
That book, and Sandor has said, I think he's going back to change a few things in it.
Really?
It was one of his first books, and since then he's learned a lot, and the interest has grown so much, and there's sourdough people, coming out with much more informative books than that. Sure. It was just a simple recipe.
Sure.
At the time, he was really into that it comes from the air.
Yeah.
But now it's from within the flour.
Right. Okay.
And
but it's the flour reacting with something in the environment that creates it?
It's on it. It's on it.
Right.
It's living on it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why when you want to make a really good sourdough mother, you'll use a couple of different yeasts, like a rye and a whole wheat, rather than just a plain white.
But the flour still needs to be in contact with air, though, doesn't it?
Yes.
If you kept it in a completely
you need to put water
close
in.
environment.
Water is the thing.
Okay,
yeah.
that's the catalyst.
That's the catalyst of my other favourite life-changing ferment, which is mead.
Right.
If you honey will sit there dormant, and you add 1 drop of water, and it comes alive again, and all the bacteria that's been sitting there. Yeah.
Okay. So if it's completely purified water, if it's like, what do they call it? Like
the dead water.
Yeah. It wouldn't do anything.
I haven't even thought about that.
Yeah.
I think it would still do something.
Okay.
Actually, I do.
It's interesting. I'd like to find out.
It's not necessarily the bacteria in the water. I think it's feeding the yeast.
Yeah.
Feeding the living yeast. Yeah.
Okay. And so you were...
So it was sourdough, to sum that up. Sourdough changed my way of thinking of everything. I was just like, holy shit, I had children, and I'd spent a lifetime of thinking about germs and bacteria being something to stay away from.
Yeah, as most people
And there
are.
it was in the air, and it was enhancing something that I loved. And my daughter actually did a project. Were you baking just for yourself? For the kids. Yeah, just for eating.
Sure.
And we did a project, then we put... all the flour and water in different bowls, and we put a grape in one and a plum in the other, and we tried to work out which one attracted the best yeast and what loaf was better. I did go all the way, and she did a science project, because we're in America, they do those science projects there.
The science fairs.
It's so annoying.
With the volcano that actually has to erupt.
Yeah. So we did that on sourdough.
Right.
And actually she put a lolly in one, and that turned out to be the best one, which was a bit disappointing.
Well, I would think that probably the huge sugar content.
We were disappointed in that, but that was the truth. And I did mead after that, and then that was the awakening for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was it that took you to Seattle?
My partner's work.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so did that kind of lead you further down, interest into other forms of fermentation?
Not really. I mean, I did, so the sourdough experiment, and then the changing of the way I thought, and that bacteria is, something you can add to and play with to get another reaction and change the flavour. That was there. And then my cooking changed somewhat from that.
Right.
And then we moved to Brussels, and I was just drinking lots of beer and chocolate and, all the food there and enjoying life.
Right.
And then my youngest daughter got really ill. And towards the end of that sickness, I learnt from a friend that, because she wasn't getting better, it was quite a terrible time.
Right.
And someone said to me, you need to forget about all the other symptoms now and just replace all the bacteria that's probably missing from her gut.
Yeah.
And so I did a few searches on that, and I was like, bingo, I've been fermenting food I know how to get bacteria.
Okay.
I had never connected the two together. One was about food and loving food, and the other's about health, but all of a sudden they were joined.
Yeah.
And the gut-brain connection and all that came, and I was like, oh, God, when I lived in Japan for 8 years, I loved natto and miso, and they're fermented. And so straight away, she'd been grown up on miso.
Out of interest, when you first got to Japan, did any of the locals kind of give you natto just to sort of say, I wonder what she's going to think of this?
Yeah, well, I lived in a dormitory when I first got there.
Right.
At a ski resort.
Really?
Yes, and that was all that was on offer. We had rice, I had raw eggs sitting there you could grab. Mayonnaise and things like that. But it was rice, a miso soup, which was quite shoddy because it was for a large amount of people.
Yeah.
And then heaps of natto. So I'd watch them eat it and I'd be like, I'll just have mayonnaise on rice then.
No, that became my breakfast when I was an exchange student. And I was 16. I mean, when I was 16 and 17, I'd eat everything. I still sort of am like that. But, at first, of course, nut dog is going to turn you off a little bit, but you acquire a taste for it, and it's delicious. But that's what I'd drop a raw egg in with the natto, some soy, mix it up, drop it onto some hot rice and with some shallots. Beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. Anyway, so Lulu, the girl that we're talking about, the youngest, she'd had that. And we would usually put it in okonomiyaki with some mochi. Yeah. That's a great combination.
Yeah, of course.
And so she'd had that, so I knew that that's a very powerful, what do you call it, when it pulls toxins out with it?
Yeah.
There's a word for it, but that's a powerful ferment.
Finding agent.
Yeah, so it binds things and pulls them out.
Yeah. So. In wine, typically you use bentonite.
Oh, okay.
Or like egg or fish-based products. They're very good at binding and cleaning things up. It sounds like the natto is a much nicer form of finding agent.
So, I knew about miso and natto. I gathered those, and then I knew, sourdough, but that's not really adding bacteria to your gut, but it makes the bread easy to digest.
Tastes better as well.
Tastes better. And then I realised, oh, gosh, what I was doing in Chicago. Before we lived in Seattle, we lived in Chicago, and I learned to make pickles, kosher pickle thing. We lived in a Jewish neighborhood, they were fermented. And I was like, there's a difference between pickling and fermenting, and I'd learnt that.
Okay.
And so I don't know, it was just like bang, everything I'd learnt along the way was all sort of drawn into a line all of a sudden.
So did you have any experience when you were in Japan about fermenting or pickling or that kind of thing?
Yes, I did. And I had a little old lady that lived, because after I did the ski resort thing, and I ended up living in a small town outside of Tokyo and didn't have any friends, 6'2". I was just in town, and I made friends with old people.
Sure.
Basically, at the beginning.
Because old people in Japan, they don't give a toss.
I couldn't probably see who I was.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a little lady down below my apartment that I'd watch, and she had a garden. And she was there all the time.
Sure.
So after a while, she saw me watching her, and she invited me down, and I just hang out with her. So I did a lot of the pickling with her.
Right.
And I found that crazy, because they use a lot of beds to pickle in, miso bed. You just put garlic into miso and let it sit. Or the nukadoko. You know that?
No.
That's using rice bran. And it's like you make a bed of gooey, sort of like sand, wet sand.
Right.
And you shove the vegetables into that.
Into what kind of vessel?
That's how you get takuan. Takuan, that's that bright yellow daikon.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's made in a nukadoko.
Okay.
It's not usually yellow if you do it yourself.
No.
It's pale yellow.
Pale,
off-white.
Yeah. So when you say, what kind of vessel would you be putting that kind of...
Anything. Just
jars
a little...
or
no, more like
a
casserole, a deep dish.
With a lid on it?
Yes.
Okay.
But you don't really
But not sealed?
No.
Yeah.
You don't really need to seal it.
No.
It's sealed in. So the vegetable gets shoved into that wet, sandy mixture.
Completely covered.
Yeah, and depending on what you want, you can stay in there for years.
Wow. What would be, and so in a way that's just a very traditional way of preserving something.
And so they have, I think what was really important for me in the whole fermentation thing is they still have that in their daily lives, whereas we in Australia, like my grandma's Dutch, she doesn't bring any sauerkraut equipment with her here on the boat. It's not in my everyday life to see someone making sauerkraut.
That's the thing, though. We hear they go, Australia, you can grow anything. It's summer 12 months a year.
Yes.
We have no problems. We don't need to be, growing all these root vegetables
Yeah.
and pickling stuff because we can't grow anything this long winter.
Yeah.
Although at the moment it does feel like an extremely long winter.
It does.
Short days, very cold mornings.
I love it. It's my new thing. I have to keep saying it because everyone in Melbourne, they're just like,
Everyone
it's not
complains about
cold.
it,
They
yeah.
keep talking about it like it's cold every year. It's winter every year.
But the thing
Why are
is,
you so
it's so fun.
surprised?
It's so funny. Every year, the summer feels hotter, winter seems colder.
Yeah, everybody.
It's
Cold
just our perception, I guess. But that's the thing, and so I guess I find that fascinating that those northern hemisphere, the more further north they are, the more that becomes important.
that's
The
right.
further away you are from the ocean, for example, you
Yep.
can't fish or anything like that. So you need to find nourishment wherever you can. And
Yes.
I was just talking about this the other day in the context of wines. Have you heard of orange wine before?
No.
Basically, they're wines that are made from white grapes, but they're with the skin contact. And
Right.
so I kind of make the argument that traditionally that they would do this in certain parts of the world because they wanted to get as much nourishment as they could, because there's a lot more really good, healthy stuff in skins and seeds that would otherwise be taken away from the wine if the grapes were just pressed. So
Yes.
that's actually taking nourishment from it. And that was an important part, that they would be essentially preserving the grapes that they'd be
Yes.
harvesting by putting them into a clay jar, all of it, and just leaving it there.
Yeah.
And they could just draw down from it if they wanted it. But like if you look at Scandinavia or, even Eastern Europe and into Russia and then
Be good herrings.
Korea and Japan,
Yeah.
these really cold places that possibly,
Even, I mean, if you think of Korea and Japan, they're surrounded by water.
yeah.
A lot of their
But
fermenting
Scandinavia is
was-
surrounded by
too.
water as well. So, but they would be
There's a lot of
pickling
fish. There's a lot. And in
Preserve,
Japan,
they'd be
that's how
preserving
sushi.
fish, drying fish.
That's how sushi came to be. It was they used the rice as a bed to ferment fish in,
Yeah.
and the rice would get sour from the fermentation.
Yum.
So this new way of making the sushi rice with mirin and
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
that's recent.
Sure.
It used to be purely from a year with fish all in it. Yeah.
That sounds so yum. And so did you start to pickle stuff yourself whilst you're in Japan?
In Japan, yeah, well, yes, I did it with her, and then I'd have her stuff. And when I started making friends, they came up to my apartment. They'll be like, "Oh my God, it looks like my grandma's house in here. What's going on?" And I had no idea.
Wait a second, you're a Westerner. You're not
Yes.
supposed to be interested in this kind of thing. That's weird.
It's true, but yeah. So I learned a lot from her, but it wasn't like something that I was 24, 25.
Yeah.
And I also had a very good, I called him Otor-san. He was an owner of a restaurant down the road, and it was a very posh one that I could never have afforded to go to. But, and it's not sleazy, but he would let me go there, and it made his restaurant look more international.
Sure.
It was kind of a quiet deal. We didn't really talk about it openly, but he'd always say, "Oh, come for dinner tonight. I've got some special people coming," so I'd join them.
Yeah.
And I'd get the meal, and it was always amazing. Like we had the puffer fish a lot,
Fugu.
the scary one.
Yeah.
I got to have things that I would never have paid for
I'm not sure if I ate
as a
it.
teacher.
I'm not sure if I ate it when I was there. I don't think I did. I mean, they might have
Yeah,
given
they
it
would
to
have
me.
made a big deal about it.
Probably.
You only get a tiny piece
Yeah.
of sashimi.
Yeah.
Or cooked. Yeah. Anyway, I had a lot to do with food because of him as well. I hung
Right.
out with him a lot.
Sure.
And he took me down the coast fishing. Like he would dive in for minutes at a time and pull out fresh fish, proudly. And then we'd have to eat it raw. And it'd be 7 a.m. and eat tuna belly with a spoon,
Yeah.
There was a lot of food there for me for the whole time,
Yeah.
food learning. But when I left, it wasn't like I was a food person.
No.
I was just a teacher and a
It was just
mum.
part of the experience. Yeah.
But now I see that it's really it's handy.
Sure.
Yeah, it's for sure.
So, and in Belgium, you said that you were, enjoying a lot of the local
Beer.
produce.
Yes.
And beer is a really, really important part of the Belgian thing, and that's where they have, I think probably still is the highest concentration of naturally brewed beers, sour beers, lambic beers, that kind of thing.
Beautiful beer.
And so do you think that possibly had a little bit of an impact on you? Because without you knowing about it, you were probably putting, pretty good bacteria into your body and really powering up your own immune systems without even realizing it. And that possibly might have had an effect on it as well.
It could have done. We did drink a lot of beer. And I look back, though, now that that was 4 years ago, I look back and think, if I could go back there, I would have toured so many breweries and
what do they say about
done a lot
hindsight?
more looking into it.
What do they say about hindsight? It's always 20/20.
Yeah.
So
I just did a lot of drinking of it.
So you started to in an effort to improve your daughter's health and kind of rebuilding her natural immunities to I guess bad bacteria. You started making stuff at home.
Yes. So straight away we moved home to Australia, and I had stuff already, but I found a lady who had kefir grains, milk kefir and water kefir. And that was great because I'd been buying it, the milk kefir in America actually, and in Belgium it was all yogurt. So I found her and I was doing that, made the water kefir. That was new to me, and sauerkraut and kimchi. And I was buying miso and natto for Lulu. But people would come over, and again, I was new, so I'd invite people over, and they'd be like, "What the heck is in your kitchen? What is all this stuff?"
Sure.
And then I'd go on the passionate rant because we were just in the middle of Lulu getting better, so I was very energetic, like, "Oh my God, it's amazing!" It's, tell them all about.
We didn't know what was going on. Then I read this. Then we did this. Oh my God!
And at the same time, there were a couple of shows on. So when I started reading about it, it was quite new. And whenever I'd tell anybody, they'd be like, "Oh, okay, whatever works." But as we came, just 6 months later, there was a show on Catalyst, and people would be like, "Oh my God, I spoke to you about it, and then I saw this show, and can I have your kefir, or can you show me how to make it?"
Yeah.
So they came over, and inevitably they'd be like, "Can you just make it for me?" And I had a lot, so I just give it away. And friends had just started to say, "I want more, and I feel guilty just getting it from you. Can I buy it?" Which I thought was just the strangest thing, because it's so easy.
Well, okay,
but
on that, I explain to me how easy it is and how you would do it, because you could have said, okay, well, this is going to be, have a positive impact on Lulu. I could go and buy this, or I could make it myself. Why did you want to make it yourself?
It's actually really hard to get the real thing.
Sure.
So because of the conditions of it, I guess, because of refrigeration and pasteurization, that's what we've done. So we've taken a normal product, amongst not just sauerkraut and things, all products now. We've used this great technology, refrigeration, and ruined it by making its life longer by pasteurizing it. So when you pasteurize, you're heating something up. You would know, but you heat it up, and so you're killing the bacteria that might turn it off, make it go bad. Then you're also killing the life in it.
In wine, we learn about heat stabilization and cold stabilization.
Right.
So, with wine, you drop it down to under 0 degrees, which, technically is almost freezing it. But that has a similar impact. But
right.
And so in the context of...
Does that stop all growth? So you're stopping it at a certain alcohol?
Pretty much, yeah. It just makes it completely stable,
right.
Particularly important if you're doing it at much larger scales, and particularly if you're sending it to the other side of the world.
Okay.
But, we're talking huge scale wine production. Right. It's not really done in lovely little artisan wineries.
Well, you couldn't, now you can, because a lot of little businesses around, but you couldn't buy unpasteurized living krauts.
Right.
You could go to the Asian food store and get kimchi, but it had citric acid and preservatives and things like that in it, which it still does, the cheaper sort of ones that you get in plastic tubs. So you had to make your own for it to be real. But it is easy because...
So how did you learn how to make it?
Gosh, like I said, I made it. I'd seen it made in Seattle.
Sure.
But not really gotten into making my own because he made large batch there then and had enough for a while. Just reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the process?
So for sauerkraut,
Sure.
so the reason I say it's easy is because it ferments itself. You just, like you said with the grapes, all you're doing is putting something into the right condition and setting it up so that it naturally does its own thing.
Okay.
And large scale now, of course, have to be much more precise. But all you really need is a little bit of salt and some cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
And you chop it up. You mix that in really, really well. This is for sauerkraut.
Mix what in?
Mix the salt through the cabbage.
Just salt or
yeah.
a salty water,
Not
brine?
No,
Nothing?
don't add any water.
So dried cabbage, chop it up.
Cabbage is full of water, and the salt draws the water out. And that what's in the water is the living bacteria.
Right.
The salt discourages the wrong kinds of bacteria, the pathogenic type.
Okay.
That environment is, when it's too salty for them, they die off, but the ones that like it stay there. And the ones that like it are the ones that we like, the lactobacillus.
Right.
And
so without the salt, it would basically just go off.
you can do no salt ferments.
Okay.
But I think then it's not easy anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot riskier.
People use ocean water. They put whole cabbages in hanging off jetties, and I think the original way of fermenting cabbages might have been that they were in a pool of water in a lake or something, and they found out that it was preserved. There are ways you can do it.
Okay.
But and there are people out there. I know a couple of businesses that are working on doing no salt ferments.
Right.
I think it's pretty tough.
So do you know what the sort of, I guess, the biological process is for the fermentation? Like what's it actually taking the cabbage, the raw vegetable cabbage from to? What are you ending up with? Like I know it's sauerkraut, but
it's still cabbage.
It's fermenting what, the sugar in the cabbage?
Yeah. So the yeast and the bacteria will come out that they're living and existing in the cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
The salt is there to kill off the wrong ones, and the salt is also there to preserve it in the first, so that it goes through a life. And the first initial section, all of the bacteria are there, and within, say, 24 hours, a lot of them die off, and the lactic acid bacteria, and there are a lot of different kinds, they come out, and they start eating the sugars, and they just stay there actually for the whole time. They lactic acid is a sour flavour.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you've got in return is just a preserved cabbage, so it's still cabbage, with vitamin C, a higher, there are enzymes in there, more digestive enzymes, and a whole range of bacteria and yeasts. Yeah. So it hasn't really changed, doesn't change a lot, it's just enhanced.
Right.
And preserved.
And so what about like some of the beverages?
All right.
What's the process for those?
Depends on which beverage you talk about. We'll talk about kefir.
Yeah.
Milk kefir, it's a polysaccharide matrix with different bacteria and yeasts that live together symbiotically. So a SCOBY, symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, is a nickname for...
Is that what it stands for? Because I remember that when
people
we
say
actually
symbiotic community. And I'm like, I think it's a colony.
Colony, yeah. Colony of bacteria.
PC, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, people, I don't know.
Especially in
people
Australia.
change it to community.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Kaffir lime is a fruit.
That's it. Kaffir lime. Yeah. So forget that. Kefir, Kefir,
right,
is the name for milk kefir.
Okay.
And there's a water one as well, and it depends where you got yours. The water kefir, I got mine from somebody who called them water kefir. But if you were in Mexico, you'd get them, and they'd be called chibicos.
Okay.
Japanese crystals, they have all kinds of names. But for me, they're water kefir because, you can't change when you've learned it.
Sure.
They are also the same polysaccharide matrix of bacteria and yeast, but they feed on sugar.
Right.
They love sugar. They need a certain amount of minerals. They need the conditions to be right. But the milk kefir only needs milk. It's a sugar. It eats the lactose.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So it's a perfect drink for lactose intolerant people.
Yeah.
And it helps build your tolerance for it too by having small amounts.
And so that's what creates a very, very low amount of alcohol?
Yes. So in the milk kefir, depending on how sweet the milk is, I guess, usually we get about 0.7% in there.
Very low.
Yeah.
have to drink a lot to get any form of
Yes,
buzz.
it's a problem though because in Victoria it has to be below 0.5% for it to be allowed a soft drink, like a non-alcoholic beverage. Victoria and Queensland have just changed the rules.
0.5%.
Yeah. When I first started, the rule was 1.15.
Yeah, I thought it was higher than that. I thought it was up around 1.5.
I thought it was 1.15, and that was my goal all the way,
Sure.
to keep it under that.
Yeah.
And then they changed it without really making any huge announcements, just withdrawing a heap of kombucha off the shelves and sending some businesses nearly broke.
Thanks very much.
So it's a bit
Is there
tough
a
because
way
our
of controlling that?
water kefir, the most delicious one, the fig and ginger, is higher than that actually. And I'm going to have to. We've just got our alcohol license, and we're going to start marketing it as an alcohol.
Okay. Actually, marketing it as an alcohol.
Selling it in only alcohol stores. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Because
And
that's the only
health
place.
food
So to someone, you have to sell it to someone who has an alcohol license.
Yeah, it's going to change the business quite a bit.
Right. How much alcohol does that have?
Well, we can get it up to 2.4%.
Okay, but it's still.
I know it's really low. It's really low.
I mean,
and
light beer is still like 3%, I think maybe.
I think water kefir is a diuretic, and if you've got constipation or anything like that, it helps you out straight away.
Okay.
No one can sit and drink more than a litre of water kefir. You'll be going to the toilet, and it's not an enjoyable thing to sit and drink 2 or 3 litres of water kefir like you would beer, light beer,
Yeah.
And doesn't give you the same feeling of I want more, when you're drinking.
No, I'm sorry, I have to disagree with you. Nothing is worse than drinking light beer.
All right, I don't know light beer. I'm not familiar with it.
I don't think I've drank light beer for years.
I'm sad about the fact that we're going to have to change it.
Right.
But on the other hand, I'm excited that people can see it as a different thing, not necessarily a health drink.
Yeah.
But because all along when I started the business, I wanted it to be mainstream. I've never wanted it to be paleo or a health food.
You want it to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, I just want it to be like everybody bring it down a notch and know that all of the food we're eating has been pasteurized and changed a lot, and start thinking a little bit about that. And this is real food. It happens to be so good for your gut.
Yeah.
But so is a banana or an apple. Other food, this isn't a miracle cure.
Mm-hmm. So
we just
basically
need to add real foods in.
Changing people's thinking about food and trying
drinks,
to make them aware about how processing food strips away, good things in it and leaves bad stuff, and it has long-term really negative effects on you. I mean, if you just look at the number of documentaries that have come out in the last 5 or 10 years just about sugar.
Yes, for example.
It really, there are a lot of people who are passionate about trying to educate people and I guess making it more accessible, making it, available for people and not complicated and not kind of not nerdy or cool or anything like that. You want everyone to be able to learn about it so it's for their own health and the health of their children.
And I think like it happened with me with the sourdough, I'd been in Japan years before that making pickles, but it hadn't done the same thing to me. It was just fascinating, and it was part of everything else that was fascinating about Japan.
Sure.
But with the sourdough, it did make me, that whole thing of, oh my God, what else has been stuffed with? And our food has been taken from something quite magical and beautiful to this simple thing, just open the packet of yeast and pour it in, and the magic is gone.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about that, when, in fact, the process is magic, the real process of being able to rise bread from just water and flour. Once you start doing that, I think the magic comes back in your life about food, and you start thinking about all the other things that have been stuffed with. And that's why I like fermentation, actually, because things have to be quite pure. So with our kimchi as well, we looked into what fish sauces there were, and then I found out that not many fish sauces in the market were real or fermented, or soy sauces weren't either. They just added ingredients to make it taste like soy sauce, and none of it was fermented anymore. So it sort of took me then down a whole different path.
So people don't
disturbing path.
People don't know what the original thing, the real thing, actually tastes like. They think that's what soy sauce, for example, is, not having any idea what it actually is made from.
No, and soy sauce really originated from tamari, which is the the water that you get that sits on top of miso.
Yeah.
And I make miso at home.
My partner, as a vegetarian, uses that instead of soy sauce.
But the real tamari that you get from the top of your miso is so delicious. And you only need a little bit of it.
It's that kind of like glistening, oily sort of thing.
Water, that sits on miso.
Yeah.
And I want people to be able to taste that.
Sure.
And then go, oh, God, that's moving, you know. And instead we've got big plastic bottles of soy sauce. And then they say, soy's bad for you. Don't eat soy. And it's not that soy is really bad for you. It's non-fermented soy that's bad for you. Or, you know, highly processed soy.
What do they call it? Non-activated? What's this whole thing about activation like?
Well, that's nuts and things like that, or grains,
right.
Soaking them and activating them. When you add water to an almond, for example,
right,
the phytates or something are taken and it starts to almost bud to grow, and you're activating the life within it.
Okay.
And then you eat it like that.
That's something different. Anyway.
Yeah, moving on.
So you had friends and other people kind of saying, oh, we'd love more of this stuff, but we want to pay for it. So this is where you kind of thought about starting a little project.
Yeah, it did. It got to the point where I got 2 fridges in my shed and I'd run out of room. So I went to the health food store guy and I was just like, can I put some of my product in here and then my friends can pick it up from you and they can pay you. I don't care. Just I need help with my fridge space. And he was like, I'd love to have that. So within about...
Became your first trade customer.
Yeah, but it was within about 2 months. I was in Lake House already and Cumulus. Yeah.
So how did they discover this stuff?
I think Larissa Wolf-Tasker must have shopped. Oh, maybe there were a couple of girls who opened a new health food store in Dalesford, and they tasted it and they called me and they're like, "We want that too." I was like, "Oh, you don't understand. I'm not really a business." I'm like, "That's all right. We want that." I was like, and then I had friends and they were saying, "Oh, Sharon, I'm not, I wasn't much of a businesswoman because, and I'm still not really." The drive, I said I'd deliver it. I wasn't going to make any money. I was driving an hour to Dalesford, deliver it an hour back. And, it was a lot of time and effort for not much. Mm-hmm. But it turned out to be okay because then Alla and Larissa Wolf-Tasker from the Lake House tried it at that health food store and they're like, we'd like it for Wombat Hill and the Lake House. Mm-hmm. Okay. I wasn't impressed because it was more driving for no money, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And then I was new in town. I didn't know that was that fancy,
Big deal.
Yeah. And then someone from people staying at the Lake House, a girl from who owns Bread and Circus in Sydney, which is a really cool little Whole Foods canteen. She called and then she was like, "Can I have it in my restaurant too?" I was like, "I can't. No, now I'm going too far.
Yeah.
This is like a project that's costing me money. I'm not making any money."
Yeah.
But of course I couldn't help it. I wanted to do it. So we decided to ship it up there in the second fermentation because water kefir has a 48-hour first fermentation.
Yeah.
And then you bottle it and sit it out on the shelf for a second fermentation.
Right.
So I was like, if I can get it to Sydney in that 24 hours and during the second fermentation, then it'll be fine. And we did. And we've been doing that for years now. Now I use a refrigerated courier. Doesn't matter. But at the beginning, it worked like that.
Yeah. Okay. So how did it grow from there, and how did you kind of change your production? Yeah, I'm assuming you had to start making more, and you continued to have issues as far as storage and stuff like that.
Yes, I think I still am. I mean, I was in my home kitchen, even when we were at Cumulus, Bread and Circus, and Lake House, which seems very professional. I was still jugging it in my home kitchen. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to a friend of mine from school. They have a winery called Bindi, which is a beautiful winery, and they had a spare shed. So
I'm hoping to have Michael on the podcast sometime too.
Okay.
He said yes, but nailing him down is another thing.
Well, I was up there on their winery, and when it became and then we were working from there. We got one of those rental external fridges. Mm-hmm. And just grew like that, just incrementally. Every time I got I didn't do any sales, so because I couldn't handle we couldn't handle it. We didn't have the equipment. Mm-hmm. I was using hand graters and things. And then we heard that there was a dad from the school, and he was a chef, and so I had him over, and I was like, "How can you help me with my processes?" And he really helped because I was still in the mode of doing it and having fun. So I would listen to podcasts and watch movies while I was grating and chopping and stuff,
Yeah.
And he came in, it was completely professional. And what would take me 6 hours took him 1, So I was like, I'll pay you if you come here more. Yeah. And so Wendy, which is Michael's wife from Bindi, when it became more of a job than a hobby, she was kind of like, yeah, I don't need this anymore. It's been fun, but Roger, do you want my share of the business? Because I don't want to do this. It's hard work. She didn't need to.
Sure.
So he took it. And then we moved out of Bindi to Melbourne. And then we just kept growing like that. I've never really done any sales calls.
Right.
Because I've always been a bit frightened of if we could handle more.
Sure.
Until the last 3 months where we got a distributor. And now we've ramped it up and we need machinery. Now we need money.
Sure.
Because one mixer, they're like 30 grand.
Yeah.
So to be able to keep up, we need to put some more money in, I guess. We're at a different stage. We're kind of at one of those stages. But we've got distributors nationally. So, and we haven't changed. Nothing's changed. That's the funny thing. Like it's still the same recipe and the same exact way I've been doing it. If I was only doing it for 30 jars, it's the same for 3,000.
Right. So I guess in an effort to help the business grow and help more people learn about, this the positive influence of these kinds of products just from your health and well-being, but also because it tastes better and it makes you happier. How can people actually support you? Like what's like, do you run any kind of classes or can people come and learn and spend time with you and I don't know, like volunteer and help out, that kind of thing?
Wonderful. I love that. We have a lot of people asking if they can volunteer. We've just moved to Daylesford this week, today.
Wow.
To a big factory. We've had to move. It's cheaper out there, and also we get beautiful water. It's the old abattoir.
Sure.
On the way to the cidery.
Okay.
Have you been to the Daylesford cidery?
Don't think so.
Well,
I don't know Daylesford. But...
Yep. Okay, so it's just on your way out of Daylesford, and there's a big sign that says Daylesford cidery. You turn down there, and there's an old abattoir. Mm-hmm. And that was an accidental find, and so we've moved in there. And if they go onto our website too, we host a lot of workshops. Mm-hmm. And I love to host workshops because really I want people to make it themselves.
Sure.
And the funny one, like the harder ones that we make, like kimchi and the smoky jalapeno kraut, sure, you definitely want to buy it because there are a lot of steps involved. Mm-hmm. But your own kraut, I think it's really nice to make your own. And then maybe you can appreciate that ours is pretty good, So, but that I do, my favourite thing at the moment is workshopping and going around teaching people how to make it. And one thing that's happened that was really good is last year we won an award with the Delicious magazine, and that, out of all the things we've done, was exciting because it was mainstream foodie magazine, not a health one.
Getting out to a much bigger audience.
Yeah, just trying to say, if it tastes great, make it yourself, or whether you buy ours, it's sort of the same. But
yeah.
How can they help? I think just go on the website and learn about it. I put recipes up there.
Sure. But they can...
If they want to come and work with us, we would love that. Yeah.
I mean, I highly recommend getting up to Daylesford anyway because it is such a wonderful gastronomic destination. There's lots of great places to eat and drink and learn about produce as well. But on the website, is there like stockists as far as retail where people can buy it?
Yep. There's I'm actually just about to update that this weekend because now we have the distributor. But I do try to keep it updated. Just maybe email us or Facebook message to find out where we might be near you.
Great.
I've got a book coming out, actually.
Fantastic.
In March.
Wonderful.
Takes ages, doesn't it?
I'm sure there's going to be lots of lovely photos in there. They take a while to put together. But as far as website and social media accounts?
Yep. Instagram is just at the Fermentary.
Yep.
TARY. And Facebook too. And then the website is, we do have mail order, actually,
Oh.
if you're far away, yes.
Okay.
So, and we're starting to set that up so that we can get it to Darwin and places like that with these special cool box things.
Wow. Awesome.
Yes.
Well,
That's been a
Sharon,
project.
thank you so much for coming on the show today. It has been really fascinating. I've learned heaps, and I'm sure my listeners will come away thinking completely differently about fermented foods. So I really do appreciate you sharing your story and your experience, your expertise in this area.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
My pleasure.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of the Vincast. I have been James Guestbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and thank you to Sharon for her time and sharing her story. Please, guys, go to the Fermentary website and find out more about her amazing products. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Intrepid Wino. And please also follow the podcast on Twitter at the Vincast. Come to the Intrepid Wino YouTube channel to see some of the videos that I post, including my series Let's Taste, where I open bottles of Australian wine and share my impressions. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can do so on iTunes, Player FM, Stitcher, or any other number of different podcast hosting apps. And by subscribing, you're getting the newest episode as soon as it becomes available. And it's also a great opportunity for you to share your appreciation by leaving a rating and a review. All the information, of course, is available at my website, intrepidwino.com. So please come and visit me. Get in touch, thevincast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And hopefully we'll have some great guests coming up soon, including on episode 100. But until then, bye.